Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. I'm your host, Michelle. And today, like every other day, I'm quite excited for my guest because she's a really great friend of mine. And I've gotten to know my guest over the course of maybe the last 5 or 6 years. And in that time, I continuously am in awe of her abilities to recite information, to deep dive into esoteric subjects and to understand them so well and to be able to bring them into the 3D in such a beautiful way that I had to bring her into the healing home because for all the reasons I stated, but also she has so much knowledge to share. And I know that the people out there listening will love to hear what she has to say. And her name is Regina La Rocca. And I know her out here in the Pacific Northwest. We've, like I said, known each other for a while. And Regina is a tarot reader. She is a student of the mysteries of the universe. She is a wonderful human being. And above all, she's a great friend. So I am really excited to welcome her today. So if you all could help me in welcoming Regina to the stream, we're going to have a great conversation. Hello, Regina. How are you?
Good. Hey, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thanks for being here. This is awesome. It's kind of been in the works for a little while. We've been trying to figure out a way to sit down together. We were going to first do this in person, and now here we are on the internets. So I'm really grateful for our friend Christy as well to help you with the computer situation, to bring it all together. And here we are, and it's awesome. So how you doing today?
I'm hanging in there. Yeah, it's thankful for Christy, or we wouldn't be doing this right now. So, computer disasters.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's awesome because I know it's out of your realm a little bit to be doing the online stuff. So I am just really grateful that you're willing to do it. And let's just, let's get into it. And I would love for you to be able to introduce yourself for people who don't know you, because a lot of the people listening might not know who you are at all. But some might. So if you could just give us some brief information about yourself and where people can find you if they want to find you on the internet.
Okay, yeah, like Michelle said, Regina La Rocca. It is La Rocca. My family's from New York, so they never pronounced it right. So we're pronouncing it wrong still. Michelle kind of summed it up. I don't know what else to say. I've just been studying metaphysics since I can remember. It's always been my first interest. And then I got lured away by music, which I guess in a way it's the same thing, but harder to put principles into practice depending on what music you're playing. And so, yeah, I'm a musician, tarot reader, and lifelong student of studying everything I can get my hands on. So
yeah, totally. Well, that's well said. And that's how I know you too. And I'll just say too, to do a little more of an introduction of how I even found you was at the Northwest Tarot Symposium. And this was probably like, I don't know, like 6 years ago now. But I remember
2018, 2017, maybe 2017, I think.
I bet right around there. And I remember like finding you and seeing your table and thinking to myself, I have to get a reading from this woman. Like I just knew. And as soon as I sat down, we not necessarily clicked, but I felt a connection to you without even knowing you at all or whatever. You gave me a wonderful reading that was super insightful, specifically at the time in my life. And ever since then our paths continued to cross because a mutual friend of ours invited you to a party of hers to actually read tarot at the party. And then the connections just continued and it was really cool. And you are really great friends with my fiance, Mario, as well. And you guys blend really well with your information. And so it's just like the rest is history kind of thing. And here we are today. And so ever since that point, I've always looked up to you in so many ways. And one of the ways I look up to you is your ability to retain this information and to recite it and to understand it and then to apply it in the 3D. So, in your memory, because I know you've been doing this work since a teenager, is there something that stands out to you, though, that was like, whoa, there's something different here and I need to go down this rabbit hole?
Yes, that's an interesting question, because I don't think I ever had that process. Um, it was just normal to me, I guess. And I didn't realize that it wasn't normal for everyone else. That's the best way I could say it. Like, I think I had a lot of memory with me from whatever I'd been doing before. And I just was like, here's this. I guess the first thought I had was like, they're stealing all our information from us and we got to remember it. Like, that was the first thing I remember. And I was like 7. And I don't know if that had to do with like where I grew up. Well, my family's from the East Coast, but when I was 7, I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and there was a lot of Navajo and Hopi culture there. And I could tell they remembered like that. And I was just like, why can't we get this back? Like, we need to get it back. That's the only thing that's been driving me pretty much my whole life. Like, there's knowledge out there for everyone to receive, and I think it's intentionally being kept from us, and we can remember. And if we remember, it'll shift everything, because I kind of go off the thought, it's probably called the thought form grid by a lot of people, but that's the term I use. It's the ether, but the ether has many qualities. And so the work I focus on is how thinking is being imprinted in the ether. And so I feel like I was in touch with that, not in those terminologies, but in our trying to remember what I think is already innate in most living things, because most living things live in symbiosis with each other. And our human culture isn't part of that, for whatever. That's a whole other tangent. But we can remember how to do that, because there were human societies here on this earth that did that. So it's not impossible, but I think that's what we have to remember. I think I got tangented from your question.
No, you're good.
So how did I do this when I was young? I did it. I mean, I had that memory, and then I had a voice. So, and it turns out it wasn't really a spirit guide. It was like probably a ghost of somebody I knew from before. But I'd been talking to that voice since I was like 3. So 3 or 4, like, it literally taught me how to tie my shoes.
Oh, whoa.
So, yeah. And then I had that voice and it took me till I was like 40 something to get rid of it. And I had people in my early 30s, energy healers, telling me it wasn't a guide and I needed to get rid of it. And it was helping me. And so I didn't want to get rid of it. And it was interesting because I learned a whole lot by that process. And it made me realize how many things that people think are guides and that are helpful, they're actually helping. I don't know if they're past relationships people had, or family members that have passed, I think, and not to say, but if you're not, what I learned from all that is, if you're not crossed over to the other side and you're trying to help from the astral, then you're in a denser frequency. And then the guides are crossed over and helping from a higher frequency. And whatever's helping in the 4th dimension is blocking what you agreed to have help you, that's in a higher dimension. And so you've got this energy in 4D, whether it's really helpful or there's also beings in the 4th dimension that are not helpful, and they're faking being a relative or somebody you know. But there could literally be relatives and people that are stuck there, that don't even know what they're participating in. So it turned out that this voice was probably somebody I knew before and was literally trying to help me, but was stuck. And so when that voice finally got crossed over, I was able to access my other guides, because they were there, but they were quiet in comparison, because they were at a less dense frequency. So I just was working with all that from really young. And then that was just normal. And then when you try to tell people about it, they just think you're a crazy kid and don't want to hear about it. So I learned really fast that that's not normal for everyone. And then when it is normal for everyone, it's got a medical diagnosis along with it. So I just went to find books because when I was young, there wasn't the internet. So that sounds so weird to say. There was no internet. I'm that old. So yeah, you had to go find books, and it was hard to find books. We moved from Phoenix to rural Oregon. So where we lived in Oregon was, where I'm still in Oregon, but I was way out in the country. So it was very hard to find resources. And so then as a teenager, there was mushrooms growing all over the place. So that was what we were using. And we were actually, which was really surprising for teenagers, somehow I attracted to myself a group of people that were not into partying. And we were using the plant medicine as a plant medicine in meditation and trying to figure out the realms. So it was like direct contact with the information. It wasn't coming from the internet or from books. And we had to put the pieces together ourselves.
Yeah.
So, and then I tried to find the real resources as I got older, and more resources became available. And I also tried to find a lot of elders. I spent most of my teenage life going around any group of people I could, the Rainbow Family and communes, and anywhere I could go to find people that retained this knowledge. And I'd find the elders and I'd ask them, like, what did you learn about this and this and this? And what were your resources and how did you get it? Because there was no other way to get it. So a lot of it was verbal and from people that I knew that taught me things. And I don't know where they got their information from. Like, there was no fact checking back then. It was like, oh, here's an elder that carried this knowledge and they applied it in their life and it worked for them. And then you have your own sense of like, is this valid or not? And then I applied what they teach and I kept what worked and released what hasn't.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I don't think I know I've heard some of that history of yours, but not all of it. And to me, it really it shines through into your life now because like you said, you guys were tapping in and trying to reclaim this information, remember it. And I feel like that is like one of your gifts here. That is like you're living your purpose. And that's one of the things that I noticed about you right away. And that's
I
like
think so.
oh gosh, damn, yeah.
What is it?
No, totally, because you are one of those types of people that's a beacon for this stuff. And you've always been a very strong proponent of keeping hold of books, especially we've had epic conversations with the group of friends that we surround ourselves with. But I remember specifically during 2020, both you and Christy talking about like what we need to do is be getting books and holding on to them right now because we're going to start losing this information if we don't do that. And I think we're living in a time like Tartaria right now, where we're going through an episode where it's like, okay, we're starting, something is really coming through. There's a big swing happening and things are starting to be erased. Stuff is starting to be a little more shadow banned and all that stuff. And it happens, weekly almost. You can see this change happening.
It's happening on search engines. I mean,
there's
search engines, like, stuff is down the street and it's not on the Google map. And it's like, why is that? Because they don't have a website. You're not going to put them on the map. So, I mean, it's at every level.
It really is. And it's even happening now, even on YouTube, specific people that I follow. I know they're going live and it does not show up on my my sidebar anymore. And it's people that I know are reliable. They go live every single week at this time on this day. And it doesn't show up anymore. And so anyway, I think like that's why these conversations like we're having, people like yourself are very important right now and always, because it's a priority to make sure that we're still attached to this stuff and unattached to the shit that we shouldn't be. And so before we move on, I wanted to ask you specifically about when you found out that whatever was giving you the information or helping you, what did you notice? Was there an immediate thing that you noticed when you were able to detach or cut that cord? Or was it more of a subtle thing?
No, it wasn't subtle because for me, well, it's weird when, I don't know if you've had energy healing, you like there, sometimes you go through these like shaking things when you're getting stuff removed. So they're like the physical process, I could feel like something leaving for sure. And then psychologically, it was like losing my best friend. I mean, it was
Oh,
not a happy time psychologically. Like it was like all of a sudden it was like, whoa, like 40 something years of like having someone to talk to that wasn't there all of a sudden. It was a weird, it was a few months before like I was adjusted to that loss. I felt it like a loss, but I definitely knew it was the right thing to do because all of a sudden, like in the energetic realm, a whole new field of information was accessible that was not there. I couldn't get to it before as easy.
wow. That's so cool because it does make me think about how many of us, I think of myself too,
Mm-hmm.
how many of us are in that situation and we don't know it. And
Yeah, I
what
didn't know it. Like I didn't even believe it. I mean, I had people I totally trusted telling me that's not a guide. You need to let it go. I mean, and I'm like, well, why is it there? It's been there since I was like 3. Like, why do I have to? I mean, it was probably there before that. I didn't even know. I just remember like it literally taught me to tie my shoes. We lived out in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. And I was just home alone in this giant farmhouse with my mom because my dad was gone every day and she had a baby. And I was, I talked to that voice and it helped me learn all kinds of things. So I don't know. And I have a good memory of being 3 because I was in conversation, which was, I think, is interesting. Like, because,
yeah.
yeah. And so I had a great self-talk thing going on with it. Anyway, I
Wow.
lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I mean, I think we're doing just fine with where we're heading because I want to get into tarot, but I almost feel like we should just get into the courting stuff because we're kind of
Yeah.
that's where we're talking about with this specifically. And
Mm-hmm.
you have a wonderful course, Thought Forms and Psychic Chords.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that from you a couple years ago and it kind of blew my mind in a lot of ways. And um when we're talking about this entity, this thing, whatever it was that was guiding you, that wasn't your guide,
Mm-hmm.
this is where the courting and stuff comes into play and is really important to understand, specifically for people who, like yourself, or anyone who's working with divination, working in astral travel, working in these more like kind of expanding realms. It's really important to understand courting, and you are a
Mm-hmm.
person that I always think of when I think of this. So what are some techniques that you use to uncord yourself from situations, people, and energy? But before we get into that, can you just talk about this concept a little bit for people who may be unfamiliar with it?
Okay. So I'm going to back up for one thing I'm trying to remember so I don't get distracted. The thing with the books, like about collecting them, I look at anything, and this applies to the courting question as well. I think everything manifest in the present physically was actually manifested in the past in 4D. So the third dimensional realm is kind of the output of a printer in a way. Like we're creating in the present in 4D, and I that's the thought form grid. And then once something's present in the fourth dimension, there's a time lag before there's manifestation in the third dimension of whatever it is. And there's certain times where the time lag is almost not noticeable. Like if we're obviously if like we're creating a tangible thing like a table, it's going to be a long time lag. But if when we're dancing or playing music or doing readings and doing divination, it's almost instantaneous. Whatever's being created is coming right back down. And which is why we feel joy and chi and prana when we're in those processes, because we're present. And the fourth dimension and third dimension on presence is the same, is very close in time, because time doesn't really exist there the same way. So when we're creating thinking about the stories we hold about our lives, like how we feel about people, environments we're going to go into, places where we work, opinions about politics, about everything. We're going into a thought form, not that we're going into the grid, which the Akashic record and the thought form grid might be the same thing. I'm sure the Akashic record definition might expand past the thought form grid. I don't know. I haven't really looked into that, but if people know that term, maybe it makes more sense to go, oh, thought form grid, Akashic record, similar. So when we create something there in our minds, it's got a frequency. So everything is frequency. The table on a frequency level is alive because it's made up of atomic structure, which is alive. So I believe everything's kind of alive. And certain things collect consciousnesses. And 4D overlays 3D. It's not like a sand layer. It's all the higher dimensions overlay inside. So when we think things, it determines manifestation here. So how we're thinking about our health, how we think about other people, and also what we're holding in our body on an energetic level within the elements is constantly imprinting the thought form grid. And so it matters because of our health. It matters because of who we're attracting into our life, our access to information, and then the kind of emotional scenarios that we end up playing out with other people, and scenarios based on what we believe the world is like. And that's why there's so much stuff of like people believing the world's gonna separate into two separate earths because one group of people are thinking this way and another group of people are thinking this way, and eventually it'll be so radically different it'll divide like a cell. That's a theory that people have. So where you are in your thinking is going to determine what shows up in 3D. So does that kind of describe it?
Yeah, no, that definitely describes it. And one thing that I am thinking about that I remember you talking about, because, we've done tarot meditations together and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things you've always talked about that's important is when you're asking for support from your ancestors or your guides, to ask your ancestors and guides in the 5D. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I always remind myself of.
Or up.
And
Yeah.
yeah, or above, because
Yes.
of what you were talking about earlier in the
Mm-hmm.
40s. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that too, like this cross-dimensional thing and why that's important to be, requesting from the 5 and beyond.
Okay, that's the question. Why it's important?
Yeah, why is that
because
important?
I think you regroup, the higher selves are regrouped past the 5th dimension. So because there's so much stuff we could talk about. I don't know where to start because I don't know everybody's background. But I think as a whole spirit, we exist in 5D or beyond. Like when people say, oh, this is a 7th dimensional spirit or 11th dimension. Whatever dimension we live in as a whole spirit is beyond the 4th dimension. And a piece of us stays there, which would be our higher self. And a piece of us incarnates here. And that's what the silver cord is attached to. So when we die, we go back into that larger piece of ourselves. And I think we get past the veil of forgetfulness and we go back in and we remember what we're doing. And then we get incarnated here again and don't remember what the whole wisdom of that, our whole self is. But we get parts of it if we have clean access to that part, which is about keeping ourselves clear spiritually, because it allows us to access direct information from our higher self, which also has access to other beings in that dimension that it can learn from and grow from as well. So if we don't have a clear connection to our higher self that's outside of this grid where everybody's regrouped and has their memory, then we're getting the 4th dimensional information, which is a mix of people that might be there. You're still corded to the higher dimensions if you're in 4D, but you might still be watching and participating in 3D in a way, like I was talking about, like stuck ancestors or lovers or friends that are there. They might not be operating at any higher level of awareness than you are. So think of it like a maze. 5D and up, you're out of the maze. 3D, you're
Okay.
in the maze, and 4D, you might be walking around the rim of the roof or something. Like you can kind of see more, but not completely. And that doesn't mean there's not advanced consciousnesses that are there intentionally. They could be, I mean, they might be able to do that, or beings that aren't good for us that are there. They might live there and that's their normal realm and they're not stuck. But for humans, souls, I think we get stuck there. I mean, I think it's fine to astral travel there and learn, because it helps us in 3D. It helps us, like, I think remote viewing, you're in the 4D. If some of our dreams are in 4D. And it's not a bad, I don't think of it as a bad place. Some people think the lower astral is a bad place. And I think there's just stuff there we can get really stuck in if we don't pay attention or go in there consciously. And that's why I think the more conscious we are, but our actions that we're taking, the better we can navigate these things without getting tangled up in stuff we shouldn't be tangled up in. And that's the astral, I call them astral knots, where we get stuck in stories from involving other people that anchor us in the past on a timeline. So this is kind of a tangent, but it matters. That's what I'm saying. You were talking about how we have to hold on to books. And I do agree, because books are getting altered. But I think we can download the books again from that Akashic record, because I think the information that's coming through is always there. But if we lose the information that's even real, which is kind of what's happened, like there's so much non-belief in the spirit realm at the moment for a lot of people. And they're trying to contrast, you either believe in the spirit realm or you believe in science. And that's major propaganda in my mind. Science is about figuring out the true evidence of the natural world. And there's things that are known in spiritual traditions that are real in the natural world that math hasn't been able to verify. So we can't just say the only real science is the stuff that we've already figured out. There's going to be way more science that we haven't even figured out yet. And in order to figure out what it is, we have to ask the right questions. And spiritual terminology allows us to ask the right questions. I do think at some point, every single thing that's going on in the natural world can be talked about and made conscious. But I also think there's a point where, like people say with AI, that things can be so complex that we're not going to be able, language could actually slow us down. Like we can know more things without language, through feeling, through immediate knowing, where if we try to articulate it, it won't be useful anymore. I don't know how else to even say that. There's things we can know that we can't try and talk about. Like someone tried to get, like an example of that would be like, if you had to figure out all the math to take a left turn and how many inches you would have to turn your steering wheel at the same time you had to let off the gas, you wouldn't be able to move the car, right? So we just know, like, here's how you take a left turn. We don't try to analyze the whole thing. So there's a part where our mental body and the analysis of how things are done is not going to serve us. And so that's why the intuition, the heart chakra, the Heart Math Institute has a ton of information about this, where as you expand from the center out, your bandwidth field is so big that you can receive information from a lot more frequencies, more information from the higher realms without having to figure out all the details, and just know, like, this is what to do right now. This is the way to heal this. This is the way to fix this. This is the way to change the inside of my body. And you might not be able to have the words to articulate it. Language can slow us down. So, but there has to be a belief in that part of possibility and potential, and the humility to know that our human minds don't have everything figured out, in order to ask the right questions and allow ourselves to go into this right processes where we can have the math to go, yeah, okay, that we can do that again and again, and it works. And that's science. If this works by experiment, then it works, right? So to me, it's not about anti-science or anti-spiritual. It's like science is a tool we use to validate what we know spiritually. And if we repeat it and it works, then there it is, right? Isn't that science?
Yeah, totally. That
And
makes
it's
sense.
physics basically says, if the particle wave thing, if you believe it to be one way, it's going to appear that way. So I think we can even bring that into our lives and go, well, if we don't believe we live in a universe that's multidimensional, or we don't believe we have another aspect of self, then the world's going to reflect back to us things that show that that's true. And if you do believe those things are there, you're going to get reflected back to you that they're there. So if that's how the universe is structured, then what's real? What's
Right.
true? Yeah, and I think that's the questions that's coming up right now for everybody, even around AI. Like, what's real? What's conscious? What's, is this a simulation? Is this not a simulation? What would that mean? Can we have both? Parts of it are simulation and parts of it are the natural world, and we're in these little simulations within the natural world, or is simulation part of the natural world? Like, there's so many things we have no idea about, and which I think is it's a mystery. So that's good. That's what drives us. That's what allows our creative questions and the way we look at what is.
Yes.
But I think
love
from our
this.
human self, since I think we're always channeling, whether people consider themselves channels or not, because our mind, you even look at Greg Braden work with, like, he's trying to validate that our memory is stored in the magnetic field, which seems to make a lot of sense, especially with all the solar flares and all the magnetic field shifting and the Schumann resonance being way up, that people are having a hard time remembering things. And then people can't tell, oh, is this long COVID, or is this me aging, or am I getting dementia, or is the magnetic field just breaking down? And that's where our memories are. And we have to have some sense of field structure within our body so we can re-access those points in the ether. So I definitely believe in the ether. So, and the thought form grids in the ether. So our memories are stored. So we need the right amount of minerals in our body to run the right magnetics, so we can access collective memory, not just our own memories.
Yes, I love that you went there, actually, because this puts me into a place where my mind has been going, is the world of plants. And
Mm-hmm.
this is, I think, this is one of the reasons why I think we as people and animals here have such a deep connection with plants, is because of the mineral based connection. But there's this telepathy that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like what we've been talking about, it's your willingness to believe that this is actually happening that helps you to tap into this stuff. And that's been one of my biggest things, is to be an open channel for plants in that way, to be
Yeah.
able to have that pin that goes off when I walk past blue vervain, to be able to be open enough. And I think we all have plants that are our strongest allies. And I think when we
Mm-hmm.
work in that way, we open ourselves up to this. The minerals in the blue vervain resonate with my minerals that I have, or the minerals that I'm deficient in. Blue vervain is like, you need this. So come
Mm-hmm.
to me. Let's sit with me, talk with me, and I'll show you exactly what you need to know in order to get the minerals inside. And it could literally be just that you sit next to the plant and that's enough of a resonance, or you might have to
Yeah.
make the medicine and ingest it. And so I think that we work this way for a reason, and it's part of this cording and this grid. And I love that you brought the minerals up, because
Yeah.
that makes so much sense, because I think of cell salts too, which I know you know quite a bit about.
Yeah. Cell cells are awesome.
And that's the same thing with the plants. We have
Mm-hmm.
this, there's a zodiacal map to it, there's a plant map to it, and then there's a human map to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about it from this aspect, what are some of the things that you think of when you think of the mineral based connections that we might have to the earth realm, or to other people or plants? Is there anything that like pops up in your mind that you think about?
Well, frequency, because I mean, everything has a frequency, and since we're made of the elements, and I do believe each element's conscious within our being, and like our higher self is like our God of our 4 elements that are in our bodies. And I do think the elements try to run the body, and that's when we go into chaos. And if we have the higher self, if we have the elements serving the higher self, then our body tends to be stasis. So the elemental consciousnesses I see are as conscious beings. And so the earth element is the mineral content in our body. And the water is our emotional body, and our air element is our mind. And it's an air element that when the water, the element, and the air element are combining thoughts and emotions, that's what's creating solid structures in the thought form grid. So if we're having a bunch of thoughts about things that aren't serving us and feeding it tons of emotion, then something real is going to be showing up here. And it's like, thank goodness there's a time lag, because it allows us to uncreate things before they get here.
Yes.
Like when we're on plant medicines and we want to see a daisy in the wall, it's right, there's a daisy on the wall. So we're shifting into a higher frequency. And so manifestation time is shrunk, which makes it you have to be spiritually responsible if you're going to be shrinking your time lag time. Like, otherwise you start creating all kinds of chaos for yourself in your future here, because you've dreamed it up in the astral from a very empowered place when you're on plant medicines. So the mineral content, as far as like aligning the magnetic field and aligning and accessing your memories, you need those frequencies and that vibration state, which is the same power of gemstones. It's our minerals. And then cells are communicating chemically. So if you don't have the right minerals to resonate into the right chemicals, then you don't feel well. And you can I've had the conversations I have with plants are a good example of nonverbal information. Like, I mean, when you walk by them, you could tell like they're thirsty. They don't like the amount of light in here. It's too humid. Like, they just tell you, and like, it's like if your finger was hurting, like when you reach into that field with them, it helps. There's a knowing of what they're trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Just like trees. And I've actually kind of had verbal information come in from trees. I feel like they're very ancient, wise consciousnesses that are way beyond what people usually think of them. Like, they're holding some old electrical field in place that we wouldn't have, and there's something to do with them and humans and our DNA. The fact that we each inhale each other's exhales, that's like, there's no mistake that everything needs to be here in balance.
Yeah, totally. I would agree with the tree thing. And I think that this could be a whole other
Tangent.
weave too. Yeah. But it's just
Yeah.
like, dude, the fact that they log as much as they do, we have suburbia that comes through and just like plows down trees, puts up cement streets, whatever. These are antennas essentially,
Yeah.
and I know
It's like the hair.
exactly, totally. It's like it all has a purpose. And I also want to just throw this into the mineral thing. It makes me wonder if there's a reason why they want people to be mineral deficient, animals too. And a lot of people are deficient in a lot of minerals that, you don't even know,
It's the
magnesium.
topsoil.
Exactly. The topsoil, our food, everything. Like magnesium is literally magnetic. We are magnetic beings. We work on this level. And what do you know? Most everybody is deficient in magnesium, And so it's just like stuff like that I feel like it's by design that the foods we eat, the things we drink are meant to drain us of these minerals so that our connection to trees and plants and other people and just the universe in general is dulled down to a point where then people just start to forget that you can actually tap in.
Yeah. And then I also think, I mean, I don't know, this is my theory, but the amount of satellites and the amount of wireless grid everywhere is completely interfering with
Mm,
our ability to evolve in our natural state. And like you said, that's affecting the food and the animals and the plants and everything. And the water, like water is so imprintable
right.
that how is all of this stuff not imprinting the water? And so it's like, if we can consciously re-imprint the water, maybe that's something we could be doing. Like if we're corded to the higher dimensions, maybe we can just that whole praying over the water for it to restructure to feed the body in the correct way. Because all of these grids are they're out there resonating with the natural grid, and they're interfering.
Right. Well, and it makes me think of a couple things too that I want to make sure to bring up with
That's
you.
fine.
But I just lost the one, so we'll go to the other one. But what's coming up to be healed?
Oh
You
yeah.
you brought that question to the table in one of your classes that you taught. And honestly, like, I am forever grateful for you bringing this up because I ask myself this
Huge.
not every day, because thankfully I don't have things that pop up every day. But when something pops up now, that is the first question I ask
Good job.
myself.
That's
And
how yeah, that makes sense. That's how
it,
I do the same thing.
it's beautiful. So let's
Yeah,
talk about
what it
that.
does is it shifts you out of victim consciousness
Yes.
instantly,
Yes, it does.
because and that's why it's important. And I think I learned it. I might have learned it from NLP. I don't remember how I learned that. I learned that from somebody, either a counselor or from a new age self-help book, or from NLP. I can't remember. I don't always remember, but I remember things because I apply them. If I apply them, I remember them. But that question, if you can ask that, then you are no longer, there's an aspect of you that's able to witness what you're being triggered by. So whenever you get triggered or you get sick, if you ask what's coming up to be healed, then you can identify what needs to be released from the energy field. And in that, if you look at everything that way, the more obstacles that are thrown at you, the more stuff comes up to be healed. And then if we're light beings, then eventually nothing could be in the light except your higher self and your soul essence and your light body, which is what we're trying to perfect so we can maintain consciousness between realms. I think that's what we're trying to do. That's ascension. It would be remaining conscious so you don't forget when you come in, and you're able to travel as a spiritual being in awareness. So if that's the goal, the more stuff you clear out of the energy field, the less confused thinking and manifestation that creates karma is going to cloud up your body and cloud up your field.
Yeah, totally. Because it makes me think about the concept of your heart being weighed against a feather at when you
Yeah,
die. You know, it's
exactly.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, same kind of concept. So let's kind of go into that a little bit. And I'd love to hear, even though I know we've talked about this, but like I said, it's like
Mm-hmm.
people out there, I want them to hear your perspective on these things because it's really important. So when you hear that, you know, when you think about that concept of your heart being weighed against a feather, what does that look like to you? And like what on the 3D level, how can somebody start to work towards the goal of releasing these things so that when we do cross over, if that's what happens, that we can maybe cross over with a lighter heart?
Yeah, well, I think that is what's coming up to be healed, because as you ask yourself that, then you have to, it forces you to take responsibility for your manifestation. So
Yes.
if, and that's the thought form grid and the chords again. So I'll just give an example. It's probably the best way. So say you're remembering a bad relationship and you're still angry at the person for whatever happened during that time. Then you've got a thought. So let's say the issue is abandonment. Like the person abandoned you. Who knows why? Just say it triggered abandonment. So then you're holding that, carrying around abandonment, and anytime, so now you got this filter of when everybody's doing something that say your friends are ignoring you because they're too busy and they're not really ignoring you, you're going to look at that like, maybe they're abandoning me too, right? You're carrying this thing. But you also have a thought to that story in the astral. And the other person might not be in that one, because in their head, they probably didn't abandon you. They probably made a boundary in their head. But if they feel like they're angry at you and they intentionally abandoned you to like be vengeful, then they would be in the story as well. So then you're both meeting in the psychic realm together in the astral knot that holds that story. And in order for that story to exist, you have to be giving it life force. So you're giving it chi, which is your fire element. And the emotional body is being affected by that chi. And then that's creating a grid. And then that grid is pulling in more people that are going to trigger abandonment. So the healing is, if you're forgiving the state of consciousness of everyone involved in that story as a soul and a body down here trying to learn and grow and get out of the veil of forgetfulness and get out of the being stuck in unconsciousness, you can come into compassion for that soul's process. And then as you do that, you're no longer in the emotional charge of that knot, and you kind of float out of it into a different frequency. And if the other people involved in whatever the negative story is want to find you, they have to come into compassion for whatever you did in that part of the story as well. And that knot will dissolve, that thought form will dissolve. And then the wound of you carrying, like this always happens to me in your energy field, also dissolves. And then you're not pulling in more situations that reflect that you're always abandoned, or you won't see the world through that filter anymore. Right. So I feel like that was a backstory to the question. Can you restate the question?
Basically, I mean, you did a good job of explaining it. I'm glad you used an example, but basically just what people can do or how they can lighten their load when it comes to the concept of
So
having your heart
that
weight
you would
against a
be,
feather.
you would be lightening that. So carrying that weight against the feather, that's going to be something you're carrying. You're going to leave here carrying that. So it's in your field. So if you dissolve it, then you're not carrying it when your heart's getting weight against the feather. Right. So, I mean, there's a book that's really, I've recommended it to everyone, and no one wants to read it because it's so dry, by Percival, called Thinking in Destiny. And he breaks all this down. It's like a big, giant book, but it's completely worth it. I think it's the most important thing. I've been trying to read it on and off for 15 years because it's really dry, and he uses very different language to explain things that we have other language for now. But I think when he wrote that, because it was written a really long time ago, they didn't have the terminology as common as we have it now. So you have to learn his terminology and go, oh, that's this thing that we already know about. But once you learn it, he's got it all mapped out. This whole thing is completely mapped out. And he's got a whole section on health where he's basically saying, this is kind of intense, it'll probably be controversial, but like cancer, for example, and like in the belief that there's a spiritual root to disease. And I've done a lot of studying about the spiritual root of disease and it seems like with Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and just Celtic pagan value systems and even Christian faith healing, they all agree on the thought form and the illness, all these different things that don't agree on much of anything else. So like, for example, my brother has MS, and MS is stored up anger at the father and like having an iron will. And if you look at each of those systems, that energy is very similar, right? And stuff with the pancreas is all based around fear, like that couldn't process, fear that you couldn't process. So in the Thinking in Destiny, he's talking about cancer, going, if you don't heal the cause of that in the spiritual body and you heal it physically, like you heal it in your body with whatever chemo or whatever other things you might do to cure cancer, and you don't heal the thought form attached to it, it's still in your aura. It's still going to, and that's why people come in at very young ages and get it again, because you have to heal what's in the light body. the aura. You have to heal it out of there to get rid of it. I mean, then that's not to say that, like, yeah, if you grow up next to a radioactive tower and you're drinking water with who knows what in it, that you're not going to get sick from that. But it's just, how far do you want to take the belief system? Like, maybe you ended up living there because you had a thought form of fear that humans are always poisoning each other and we're in a negative world and everything's toxic, and then you end up living there where all that is, and you're like, see, look, this is how the world is, and then you're sick again. So it's like, how far can you take the thought of, like, am I responsible for this as well, or responsible for that? I mean, everyone has to make that decision for themselves. I mean, you could say, well, my karma was to come in through those parents and my parents moved me there. Or you could go, that was in my field, or because it was in my field, is that how I got attracted to those parents to end up living in that place? So I think that's the best book that would break all of those questions down. I don't know if I have the answer to all those questions, but I know that that's the belief system. And I work on that level for my own health to try. And then what's coming up to be healed? Oh, I'm sick there. Oh, it's that finger. It's on my left side. It's on my feminine side. Is that finger? Look up on the Chinese medicine chart. What are the acupuncture points there? Why is that burnt? Why did that get smashed? And you try to look at the whole story and try to release the whole story.
Yes.
And
I
then
love it.
Yeah. And then there's plants and the astrology, and like, oh, like that's this finger is Venus. And then, oh, there's plants that resonate with Venus. So maybe I need to fix that. And you can take it to whatever level you want to try and work on these other levels to repair things.
Yeah.
Because we're energy.
Totally. And what it always reminds me of, that what Mario and I have been talking about a lot lately, is just that we have so many options when it comes to healing. And we're kind of conditioned to think that we don't. We're conditioned to think that you go to this white coat and you go to this office and they're going to tell you this and that this is the only way. But all along, there are like a plethora of options. And this just kind of like validates that as well. Just you listing all of those things off. What finger is it? What injury is it? Is it a cut? Is it a scrape? Is it a burn? All of that shit matters. Because if you're dealing with a burn versus a cut, then we're thinking maybe the burn is fire element and then the cut is swords. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I love the way that you think with this stuff, because it makes so much sense. Yeah. And it's like such a great way to explain it to people. And so this is just awesome to be able to like get this out there in this realm so people can hear it and then start applying it. Because I think the more that we start talking about this stuff openly and making it seem normal, the more people who might not ever consider this kind of stuff are going to start considering it. And I'm already seeing that. There's people that would have never, ever thought this, that are bringing questions to me or saying, I'm noticing this or whatever. And it's like, wow, I would have never thought you would get there, but I'm really glad to see that you have. So it's really cool. And I kind of want to go into your work with dowsing, because this kind of works with the etheric realms, the energy, the cording, and all that stuff, because you were part of a dowsing society in Portland for a long time. And that's one of the things that you did for us one time with our dowsing rods at our house. I don't know if you remember it, but you did a simple demonstration. Okay. So we can even go through the demonstration of, you had the dowsing rods and you told me, okay, think of something that makes you fearful. And then you walked towards me with the dowsing rods and they moved outward very slowly, and then you walked back to the point you started at. And then you told me, okay, now think of something that you love. And it was like incredible. You took like one step and the dowsing rods just opened wide up. And so that was a really great way to demonstrate how our auric field projects itself. So if you could, for people that might not be familiar with dowsing, just do a brief, intro of that, but then talk about your work with it and how you see it work in the 3D.
Okay, so where to start? So yeah, like in Michelle's example there, you're pulling your aura in when you're in fear and you're pushing it out when you feel safe, and that's our natural state. So our physical body expands way past what our eyes pick up on a spectrum. I mean, people that can see auras do see how large we really are. And so we move, we breathe, like we can be shrunk, we can be expanded, depending on what we're doing. So that is the ether, and we expand into the ether because we're multidimensional. So our layers of our density level is what we physically think of as ourselves, but our less dense parts aren't even on the radar, but they picking up things, receiving things, feeling things, being affected by things. And that's why I think the electromagnetic grid right now, with all the wireless, everything is affecting our non-physical aspects of ourself, which eventually affects the density of ourselves, because that's like our thought form grid. And what are we putting in there? And then it's coming in. So that non-physical aspect of us is interfacing with the ether. Everything has an energy signature. And so everything's leaving an imprint in the ether, and dowsers can read those imprints. A good example was, like, sometimes we would do tests, like you bury things and then go out and find it. And then where somebody found, if a bunch of people looked in the same place for something and it was the wrong place, more and more people would keep looking in the same wrong place, because there's a thought form that the thing might be there, and everyone's picking it up and then looking in the same wrong place because there's the thought form was there. So you can douse thought forms. So just for people that don't know what dowsing is, when you're using L rods or a stick, like traditionally it's the willow branches, that because there's a lot of water in them, and water reacts, like you can imprint your water and pray on your water. The water in wood, it also reacts to the field. So when you use like a willow branch, it's reacting in the ether because of the imprint in the water. And then metal is a good conduit, so it's also reacting to the ether. So when you're looking for water, you're looking for the energy signature of the water and how it's imprinting the grid. And you can see which way it's flowing. You can see how deep it is. People that are douse wells can figure out how many gallons per minute of water you're going to get, how far down you have to dig to get the water. Dowsing for water witching is a very ancient, and actually I think a scientifically validated skill. I don't think they argue about it much, because there's water dowsers out there all the time digging wells for corporation, finding them for corporate businesses. So it's not very controversial. But dowsing in our own life, so we can use, like, learn to use. I think it's very beneficial for everyone to learn how to use the L rods and to use the willow branches, because if you don't have dowsing rods, you can always go out when you're out in the woods. You can always pick up a branch. But we can also just use pendulums. Pendulums are dowsing, and our body can be a pendulum, so we don't always even need wood. We could just use ourselves by how you lean. You can lean for yes, no, and maybe. I think anyone learning dowsing, you should always have maybe. A lot of people don't teach about having neutral or maybe. So when we're asking a question, we can direct who we're asking. Like when we're looking for water, we're just asking for the energy signature of something. If we're looking for lost things, it's, again, we're looking for the energy signature of where that thing is. But I also think we can ask our guides to help direct the dowsing rods. We can ask our body. So I mostly use dowsing sometimes for my health, to see how much of a vitamin I need, or if I still need it. Like, people go, oh, take vitamin D in the winter. And, like, well, maybe how much do I still need it? Like, I'll check sometimes. I'm like, is this too much? Is this enough? Is this a good vitamin? Is this serving my body? And you can get percentages, like maybe you should be having half of that. Like, check the percentages on everything. So I use it the most for that. But sometimes also, if I'm like going to fear, like if you're going into fear, like, oh, this weird rash or this weird whatever's going on, like, is that this? And you can check, like, no, it's not that. You can ask your body, like, is that this is growing, or is that from here? And I always double check depending on how extreme things are. Like, I don't want to get anyone in a situation. Like, you have to, if you're worried about something, you should go do what you need to do to get the right information from a medical source. so this isn't, I wouldn't say to bypass a medical source, but it could also help calm the mind if you're panicking, to figure out what's real and what's not. But also, if you're panicking, you're probably not going to be very clear about your dowsing. So you have to check on things sometimes when you're centered, grounded, calm place, because if we're emotional, we can throw things off. I tend to ask questions 4 different ways sometimes if I'm asking about really serious things, and then get other opinions. Like, you can go in and get checked and then ask for yourself and ask, can you heal this? And is this the right way to work with it? So it comes down to trusting self, take responsibility for the answer you've gotten, and the wisdom to know when you need to go to an expert on something to figure out how to actually heal something. But it's really useful for that. And it's even useful for testing, like, if news is interesting, because I mean, there's always truth and lies coming in everywhere. Like, sometimes if the people speaking are believing what they're saying 100%, it might register on a pendulum as like, well, that's true because it's true to that person speaking their truth, right? So how we frame a question is huge, because we might go, is this guy lying? And you'll get no, and they won't be. But the information doesn't mean the information's right still. Like, so if you're testing information, we kind of know in our gut about information, like what works for us and what doesn't. But testing with a pendulum sometimes helps to clarify that. When you get good at a pendulum, you can move it into your body. So like, people do all kinds of things like strong, weak, or strong, weak. Like, I do that when I'm sleeping sometimes. I've learned, like, at first this method really sucked, but strong and weak, now it's really easy for me, because I could be sleeping and I'll wake up worrying about something and I can just go, is that real? I'll find out. So it works. But also, just like, you don't want to give all your power away from your own self to muscle testing every single thing all the time, because pendulums can get sabotaged in 4D. So you got to be really careful with how you word questions, because you can confuse yourself thinking you're not. So that's why neutral matters, because neutral is a way for if you are working with a guide and a pendulum, to go that wrong, you're leading yourself the wrong way with these yes and no questions. Like, change your question.
Yeah, which, that's another thing that we've been talking about is questions, Mario and I, when I say we.
Yeah.
But him bringing up the point of, like, he was like, I think questions are more important than the answers. And I think that, and you're speaking to this.
I mean, figuring out the question is like key. Like, if you're going down asking a question to any divination tool and the question's going to mislead you, then your answer is going to mislead you.
Right.
So that's why that book has a whole section on questions. It just sounds silly to read it, but if you really think about it, a question, it's huge. I don't know how else to describe it. The question matters.
It's super important. And I think that that's one of the things too that's kind of programmed out of us, is how to ask the right questions. And from young ages, we might feel embarrassed to ask a question, or you're afraid it's wrong, or whatever. And I think that if there's anything we could do to help each other and, like, the youth of today, is to kind of really instill that idea of, like, no, it's okay to ask a question. You should want to ask questions. And that in and of itself is empowering, just to ask a question. And so I love that. And the other thing about the dowsing that you taught me is creating boundaries through dowsing. And you one time told me about how you can literally create boundaries on, like, your property, for example, using your own self, using quartz crystal and copper. And you told me about how you can take the quartz and wrap it with copper, and you can bury it in the ground, like on the 4 corners of your land. And then you walk that land, however many times it is, clockwise and counterclockwise. And then you're charging it electrically, because you have the copper and the crystal. But then also, like, there's like this muscle memory, water memory that happens. And then you're like establishing a boundary. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that that's really valuable. And I feel like you could probably do that for more than just your property. I'm sure you can do it throughout your home and all sorts of spaces. But yeah, if you can expand on that kind of stuff, that's really interesting.
You kind of summed it up.
Yeah.
Pretty good. I think I've also done them above ground, like where you put the copper rod in the ground and then it goes up and the crystal is tied with the copper on the top. More like what that is, it's more of a generator. Like since they're both conduits, like amplifiers. So when
Okay.
you're using an amplifier, you have to be careful what you're amplifying, because I know people sell those things to put in their house in order to use them in meditation. But if you're going to use anything that's going to amplify your thoughts or amplify your energy field, you have to be really careful what you're saying and doing when you're doing that. Just like plant medicines, you got to be careful if you're holding one of these generators. So what they do is they change the electromagnetic grid in the areas where they are. And I, since they're in the earth, I would imagine that they're expanding earth energy there. So like orgone generators are themselves, like do similar things to that. But orgone is more of it's not as electrical as a copper crystal thing. It feels more well-rounded. Orgone's probably more well-rounded within all the elemental fields, from my sense of it. Because it's good to have organized, like by your computer, to change the out of frequency field coming from the computer or the cell phone, where a crystal grid is more about directing things. So I had them all around my property and did that little thing you just explained to disrupt the cell phone field there, because I don't like having I don't like wireless cell phone stuff around me. I tend to have everything on Ethernet in my home. So I put those all around the property to disrupt the grid. So that did make it wasn't so much a boundary like you'd think of a fence. It's more like the field is so disrupted here, you can't hold your out of tune grid here. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, because they can't insert a grid if you've got it disrupted, like an eddy in a river, right? It's going to be moving all the time, so you're not going to be able to get still water there. Like you're not going to get the still field generated there. But energy signatures also do make a boundary, like you're saying. If you walk around the property with intention, or that's why people use salt to make boundaries for protection. Salt's little teeny crystals. That's why it works. And so the crystals are creating a field, and you're sending intention into those crystals. And just like you can send intention into the copper quartz crystal and go, I want it to carry this thought, this field, right? So, and you can do it psychically with your mind. Like when I'm doing readings, I put a psychic grid around a space that I'm doing the reading in, that kind of like, like on Stargate, when you walk through that, I visualize something like a Stargate. And so when people are walking through from the outside into the area where I'm doing readings, I have that field, like anything that's not them and their higher self can't follow them into that space. Like only the people only them, that soul and their body, anything else anything corded to them has to stay outside the wall. So I can get a clear read on them without all the interference. So I set up stuff like that around my table.
Yeah. Now let's talk before we get into your oracle deck, because I want to round out the interview with talking about your deck that you created and your book. Let's talk a little bit more about the tarot and your practice with it, because that, like I said in the beginning, is how I met you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have such a great ability with tarot, and I've always been interested and attracted to the way that you explain how you do readings and how you connect with other people's guides. And that's like the point of you understanding the cording and the boundary so well as well, because you understand the importance of being able to cut these things off and how things can attach themselves to a person like you who is a reader. So if you want to go into a little bit about your practice with tarot, that would be awesome.
Okay, so tarot. So I did start doing tarot until the late 90s. I was always interested in it. I just didn't I didn't think I could understand it. I was drawn to it by all the Masonic symbols because I was realizing as a teenager, like everything running the world had Masonic symbols, and I wanted to know what the symbology was being used by the ruling class. I wanted to know what that was and understand it so it couldn't be used against me. That was my motivation, to start understanding all the Masonic symbols. And so I didn't really know about tarot too much until I got into that. And then I could just tell they were loaded with information. I never thought I'd get to the point where I would be able to read them. Like, it was funny looking back as a teenager. I was like, I'll have to be so advanced to figure that out. I'll never figure that out in this lifetime, but maybe a different one. Like, that was my thinking back then. It's kind of how you think of being a breatharian now. Like, maybe someday in the future we'll be able to go like, we thought being a breatharian was impossible. How silly. But we're not. Yeah, right now it seems like this big thing I'll never, that it'd be too hard to attain from this state of consciousness. I do think it's possible to be one. I don't think it's crazy, but I have no idea how to get there. Like, you'd have to have the light body so purified that you would be able to bring in chi without anything in the way. And then who knows what it would do to your physical strength. Like, so it depends on what you're doing in your life. But back to the topic. I guess I started my interest in it. Yeah, it came from wanting to understand Masonic symbols. So I'm lost. I don't know why.
No, you're good. Just kind of like when someone comes to see you for a reading, what's your thought process if you want to share it?
That wasn't, you worded the question a little different.
Well, kind of
I was just going to give you some background history about why I was interested in it, but it had to do. It's so frustrating. The guides, that's what it was. So yeah, I set up the reading. So my guides are speaking to the client's guides. So I'm using the tarot to translate what their guides and their higher self would be wanting to say to them if there wasn't any interference.
Okay.
And so sometimes that works great but if the people already, sometimes it just shows up like, yeah, that's what I already know, because they have a good connection with their guides. And then we have to reword the question about like, all right, what do I do about fixing this situation? Because that's the situation, right? But if the people are clouded talking to their guides, the layout works really great because it cuts through all the stories and goes, here's what they're trying to tell you. So I set it up so I'm doing that. And I also do that to protect my own energy, because I don't let things come into my body to do readings, where other readers will do that. Like if you're working with a Ouija board, you're letting something move your hands. That's, unless you set it up that it's not something else moving your hands. Like, there's a way to use the Ouija board without letting something unknown come in and operate your hands. You could have, there's probably there's a way to do it. I can think of it right now. But with the tarot, I keep it all in 4D. Like in 4D, we're talking and I'm translating. That's why I have the querents choose the cards. I don't choose them.
Right.
And then I clear all the chords, because as we're having a conversation, there's a chord. So when people leave a reading, I try to put all the chords of theirs that came out during the reading back into their higher self. And then I unravel chords between me and them. So, and then I cut them. I cut it. I cut the energy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's so wise. And that's also one of the things that always stuck out to me about you and your reading style, is that it's always felt different to me. You know, when I've had readings with you, it's just so much more accurate, and it's really cool, and you can tell a difference. And when you are aware of these sorts of energies, I think like that's when things really come through strongly for both people, as opposed to somebody who might be more skeptical or whatever. But I feel like when you are using this energy in the way you do, you can take a skeptic and turn them into somebody that believes real quickly, because you are able to attach and not attach, but to tap into their guides. And I think that's what their guides are wanting to actually like wake them up through or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it resonates.
Awesome. So before we start wrapping up, let's talk about your Oracle deck. So I've got our copy here too, but I asked you to bring yours. So this is the Oracle of the Micropatterns that Regina created. She also has a beautiful book that comes along with the Oracle. And let's talk about the process of this and what inspired you to create your own deck and what that process looked like for you.
So for me, it was mostly about the book. I wasn't going to make an Oracle deck. I was just going to write a book because so much of what was coming through from all the readings for everybody was so similar. There were times where I've just found myself saying the same things over and over and over and over. And then I was just like, okay, I'm just going to write them down because that way I can just hand people this book and then go, instead of like sitting there having me explain the whole thing. And then the reading takes an hour and a half. It could take 10 minutes and here, read these things. And so my motivation was to write the concepts down because it's so conceptual. And it's interesting for readings. Like people have so many different philosophies about how our spiritual body is structured. Some people don't even come and get a reading and don't even think there's anything outside of themselves that's participating in their life. Like they don't think they have a higher self or guides, and that it's just their human actions and it's all chance and there's no, like, destiny is an interesting word. I think our, like in Thinking in Destiny, he describes it great. Like our destiny is the thought form grid that we're creating for ourselves in the future. And so we are playing into that, and we are playing into the destiny that's set in our astrology, but we have free will, how we navigate that. Right. So people who hold a different philosophy, like I have people that are complete, I guess atheists would be the right word, and then they want a reading. They're coming from a completely different mindset about where the responsibility lies or what the goal is or why this should be cleaned up or why it matters that I'm having this negative aspect energy with someone who cares. I'm just gonna be mad at them forever and shut it down, and that there's no consequences to that. And that gets really challenging when you're doing readings. And when I believe like that should be the goal, should be cleaning that up, not just living with it and having all this negative association in your mind field for life to all the stuff that is wrong down here. Because it's about, to me, it's about transmutation and shifting everything in the thought form grid to a better world. Right. And if you don't have that philosophy, then it really changes how you're going to receive a reading. So I decided to write it all down so these philosophies could at least be looked at and people can go, oh, I agree with that, or I don't agree with that, and decide how they're going to do readings. Because some people aren't even thinking about what they think about anything. They're just doing readings and getting information, like people, like kids, when they sit down with the Ouija board and don't know that they should smudge the space or cleanse the space, is the right word now. And clear out things that shouldn't be there, and be mindful about what you're allowing to talk to you through that tool. Like, I think that's why I don't use that tool, because you have to really know what you're doing to use that tool, which is really ironic. It's the most easily accessible tool that works right away, where you don't have to study or know anything. Like, to know the tarot, you actually have to do a lot of remembrance and study about how to use it. And you can pick up that thing and not have any wisdom about metaphysics at all, and it works. So here's the simplest tool that actually requires the most knowledge to operate it safely.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you have to know what you're doing, because you can get corded to something that you can't get rid of if you're letting it use your hands. So you got to know what you're doing, or don't use it. And to me, I don't even want the responsibility of having to do all that work, all the time, mentally and physically, to clear to use that thing. It's not worth it. It is kind of dowsing in a way. And so, but I can just use regular pendulum stuff without using a board. But it gets tricky. Like if you use a board for a pendulum, and you're not talking to anything specifically. Like if you set what you're talking to, I guess it's very similar, but you have to set what you're talking to and clear and clear and clear, because you can get information that leads you down a whole wrong path and distracts you from what you actually came here to do, because you think you're doing the right thing. So my motivation was all about putting all that in print. So it's there to be remembered, and to help healing, so people can help heal the grids. Because as we heal all these collective grids, it'll help heal everything. And it'll be a service to the plant and animal kingdom, because they're getting obliterated. And if they do, then everything else here does. So, because it's all connected. The deck was an afterthought, because I didn't know what would motivate people to read this book if they weren't my clients, because the clients it's kind of a self-help book in a weird way. That's what
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's mostly what it is. I mean, the second half of it is the card definitions, but the definitions are even mostly created from rhetorical questions, because it's a training guide to get people to start talking to their own guides. Because the more you talk to your own guides and your higher self, then you clear the cord between this realm and the higher realms, and you start to clear up the astral, and you do get more accurate information that'll help you with your health and your life and your decisions and your stress. And so to me, that's the best work we can be doing here. But when you do create a beam of light between 3D and the higher realms, then it works like moths to a flame in the fourth dimension. So more stuff comes in to that light to feed, and then you have to do more clearing and more spiritual work. It's a big responsibility, and you have more responsibility with your time lag, because manifestation will happen faster when you're working in the higher dimensions. And then that means you need more spiritual cleaning and responsibility with your thoughts and emotions, because your manifestation becomes faster and clearer. So the book is designed to help people do all of the readings for themselves, ultimately. I mean, we all have psychic abilities, I believe, and we all have access to all of this information in all these realms, and we've just been taught that we don't. And if you believe that you can reawaken it, it's mostly a remembering. It's there in our soul essence. We can remember and use the tools and have the plant allies, and start to feel how alive everything around us is all the time. I mean, they're not just stuff for us to use. They're separate living beings that we have to work in a symbiotic manner with to fix all of this.
Dude,
and it comes down to day-to-day responsibility with everything we bring into our possession, and how do we return it back to the earth in a good way. If we're going to get an item, then we have to know we know how to return it back to the earth in a good way, so it goes back into the collective field. The deck is my father's artwork. He was making these things completely separate, like messing around. He was a professional photographer his whole life. He's passed on last year on Halloween, of course. And I think he
very
did it on
appropriate.
purpose.
Yeah.
I know, it's funny because he never liked any holidays. And he asked me when it was, because he knew he was dying. And I think he actually waited till that day so he could be in my mom's kitchen on that day, just as that was his humor. Anyway, he was making this artwork while I was writing this book. And then I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is super interesting, because like this one, I don't know if you can see it.
Yep.
Like if you just scry into there's a million things you can see in each image. They're photography of mostly the Oregon coast. And he just did mirror imaging and then elaborated some parts. And so I scried into them and asked for nature spirits, because they're all the natural world. And I asked the nature spirits in each card what they wanted to tell humans. And that's kind of how I got the definitions. I tried to channel the spiritual entities of that place, of each place. And if I wasn't getting anything, then I asked guides from the images that I was seeing what this what would be a good imagery, a good message for people from this image. And that's kind of how I got that. But there's so many different things you can see in these images, kind of like that. Was that a Rorschach test thing?
Yeah, I agree. And I think
Yeah.
it's so freaking awesome that you and your dad were working on this stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, because I pulled this card here.
I can't see it.
I'm going to
Which one
put
is it?
my,
Oh, yeah, that one. Mm-hmm.
and the first thing I saw, so these things here, I was like, oh, that looks like castor beans. I don't know if that's what they are, but like you said, it's like the nature spirit. That the first thing I thought, I was like, oh shit, that's castor. And I was just working with castor yesterday because I was
Interesting.
harvesting seeds.
Yeah, it
And
kind of looks
so
that way.
it does, the spiky pods or whatever. And
Yeah.
so, regardless if that's what you channeled or what wanted to come
Yeah.
through, that's why I
Mm-hmm.
love this deck. And there's a lot of reasons I love it, mostly because you created it and your father created it. And I understand that you are here to be a beacon for this information. So I really wanted to make sure people know that this deck is available and people can buy it on your website, correct?
Yeah, it's tarotwithregina.com. And you have to go. I try to make the Oracle of the Micropatterns page, the front page, but I wasn't able to do that. So I know I've done it before, but I couldn't remember. So it's there, though. You have to click on it. It's on the right side of the thing, and you can order it directly from there. And on there as well, there's a list of all the metaphysical stores in the Portland area that carry it. A lot of them, almost every one of them has it. It's at Moonshadow and Guy's Workshop out in Gresham, and all the shops in Salem, and at Invoke in Silverton, Christie's shop.
Nice.
And you can order directly from me, from my website, and I'll ship it to you within 48 hours of ordering. So
nice. I highly recommend people check out your website too, which I will have all the links to that will be below
thank you.
in the video here. And I just want to close out by saying thank you because this is awesome. And I hope
Yes.
that you want to come back at some point because I know that we could riff on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate you taking the time to talk and share your knowledge and everything else. And I recommend people go to your website as well because you have articles that you've written. You have what we didn't get into is the Way Showers College, but people can read about that on your website too if they're
Yeah.
interested and your work with them.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just really appreciate you, Regina, and I honor you. And you really have been such a positive influence in my life, and I know in Mario's life as well. And I'm really grateful that you're here and that we've been able to connect with you and continue to connect. So it means a lot that you spent some time with me today.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time. So feel like I got tangented a little bit on a couple of things, but
No, you
there's
did
so much
great.
information. It's so hard to like get it. Like, here's this short bit about that. So
No, that's what I love about doing this is that you have to allow flow to happen in conversation. That's what I'm learning is like you can come with questions and you should have questions and guidelines, but you got to allow things to tangent. And that's where a lot of the gold comes. So I think it was great. And
awesome.
again, I appreciate it. And thank you so much. And I'm going to have some updates, but you can hop off of the stream. And there should be a button that just says leave studio and that should take you out of everything.
Glasses. But let's see. Can I just hit stop?
Yeah, that'll probably do it. So thank you, Regina. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right. See you later. All righty, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning in today for this episode. What an awesome conversation. I knew that Regina would bring it. She always does. She has so much knowledge to share. And, she definitely has the ability to understand this stuff on such a deep level. And I've witnessed it in person with her. As I talked about in the interview, I've applied a lot of the things that I've learned from Regina to my own life and have seen so many positive things because of it. It's helped me change my mindset on things. It's helped me change my outlook on life. It's helped me change the way that I communicate with spirit and my guides and the plants. So for all of those things, I'm just so grateful for her, as I said, and I hope you guys check out her work. She She is doing more in-person readings. So if you are in the Pacific Northwest, in the Silverton area, she reads frequently at Invoke, and also at Moonshadow, but also now in Salem because she's living down there. So as always, I have updates for you guys that I'm going to add to the screen here. michelleshealinghome.com for all things healing home. As I've said before, we have revamped the website. I now have an online store, which has been super convenient, not only for the my customers, but for myself, because orders are so much more streamlined now. So head to michelleshealinghome.com for my blog, to book a consultation, to purchase products, just to see what I'm up to also just stay informed with Healing Home episodes. You can do all of that there on the website. Thank you to all the patrons. You guys are awesome, and just all your support means the world to me. It really is really great, and it's helping me to keep going on this healing home journey. So Chance, Sarah G, Liam, Amy, Miri and Hank, Jenny G, Erica, Moonlander, Spoons, Mary, Louie, Diane, Logan, Debbie, Natasha, Mary Beth, Nausicaa, Stephanie, Jennifer, Charolai, Peter, Elise and James, Amy, Rachel, Trisha, and Vanessa K. Thank you all so very much. So grateful for you guys. Patreon.com/The Healing Home if you'd like to become a patron. You can also just join Patreon if you just want to follow me there. You don't necessarily have to throw down any money, but any donations are always welcome and very, very, very much appreciated. Full Moon Offering newsletter. We are on number 39. So this is such a great time right now for so many reasons. But, I've been doing the newsletter for now 39 months, and it's really one of the things in my life that matters to me so much is because it's consistent. And one of the things that I've had to learn is that consistency is key, especially with projects and businesses and life and everything. And so I'm just so grateful to be able to offer these offerings every month, and it's just really fun for me. So thank you to everybody that is subscribed to the newsletter. Currently, and I just released it last week, actually just this Monday. Wow. So Mugwort Dreamtime Remedies are what my offerings are this month. And I've actually almost sold out of Dreamtime Smokes, but I'm going to be rolling more today, actually, because they sold so quickly. I've got a fresh Mugwort Dream Oil as well as a Mugwort Smudge that's available. So all of that stuff can be found on my website, at my store, but I also up here on the screen, if you're watching, have my menu that's currently going. So the Dreamtime Smokes are there, the Mugwort Dream Oil and the Mugwort Smudge, all wonderful. I love Mugwort so much. So I've been really excited to share these offerings. They've been in the works for a few months now. And actually, as we talked about in the interview, our friend Christy, she was the inspiration behind these remedies. And the reason she was the inspiration was because initially I was actually going to be offering them as I was actually going to have them at her shop. And what I ended up coming to realize, which I've realized once before in life doing my remedies business, is that I'm not quite a wholesaler. I've tried it. I've done wholesale in the past years ago, and there's something about it that the way that I make my remedies, I do such small batches that it just doesn't work out. And so, Christy is very understanding about it, and her inspiration helped me to create these remedies. And now I'm offering them up to you guys through the website, through my offering, or through my Full Moon Offering newsletter, and it feels really good. So I'm very grateful to Christy for being the inspiration and for understanding that I'm just not a wholesale gal. Although, it's fun to think about putting things in physical stores and stuff. It's not where my heart lies, because I really like doing small batches. And in order to do small batches at a reasonable price wholesale, it's really hard. So I just want to be able to offer things to people at a fairly reasonable price. And so that's why I'm going to keep it as an independent sale. So you guys can check all of that stuff out, as I said, on my website. Next Full Moon Offering newsletter is December 26th, where I'll have some new offerings for you guys as well. symbolicstudies.com for all things Mario. Check out his website to find out what he's doing. You can schedule tarot readings there. You can schedule study sessions with him. You can also download and purchase his elemental study packet, which is awesome. We also just did a presentation, Mario and I did, on the healing home, and it was about the 3 healing traditions and the 3 symbolic traditions and how they all overlap. And Mario has been doing some really awesome research on the symbolic traditions and how they correlate to the healing traditions. So you can check that out on my YouTube. This is actually going to be a pre-recorded episode. So things might be a little different in this section by the time it's released. This is going to be coming out on the 19th of December, and I'm recording it in the beginning of December. So if some things are a little different by the time you hear this, just bear that in mind. And thank you for listening, as always. So I will now say that I think we can conclude this episode. It's snowing right now and it's just glorious. So for those watching the video, you might notice that my lighting is magnificent right now today, and it's because of the snow. And I love snow, so I'm going to go and enjoy some snow right now. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you to Regina for joining us. And until next time, we will see you again. Take care.